Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico Casa. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices. Living life every day. Hello, listeners. We're so glad to have you here with us, and we are also happy to be back with you.
Ideally, we'd all be sitting in a coffee house together, right? Chatting in person during these last days of summer.
Well, but here we are. So listener, what you can do then is just pretend that we're together in person as you listen in to Kristen and I. And today's discussion, just as a reminder, like all episodes, is intended to help us all know more about the challenges facing children and families so that no child experiences abuse, neglect, or trauma.
Right. Vigilant Voices is about exploring issues that are impacting children and families and how we can all play a role in building brighter futures.
That's right. And when we think of brighter futures, we often think of educational success and maybe graduation days, right?
Yeah.
But today we're going to back up a little bit.
Quite a bit, actually.
All right. And we're going to back up to a child's early years. And so, listener, I hope this isn't a surprise to you, but what we know is that learning does not begin for a child when they first walk into kindergarten.
Not even close. Yeah.
Right. And learning begins from the very first moments of life. And frankly, in fact, while a baby is developing. But really what we know now from research and science is that the first 5 years are some of the most important and critical years of brain development that a person will ever experience.
Yeah, and little Carter's caregivers are learning this.
Okay.
Carter and listener, we've changed the sweet little one's name like we always do to protect his confidentiality. But Carter is a baby who was removed from his home of origin because his parents had demonstrated increased instability, and I'd call it a lack of consistent care.
And Kristen, if I'm remembering right, this was an emergency removal case for Carter. And so where did he go?
Yeah, so there was a local relative who was able to step up and care for Carter. And, CASA was appointed and the Department of Social Services was getting involved. And the CASA advocate learned that Carter's parents were teenagers, who truly didn't have the skills and knowledge or the support to safely care for a baby. They had no idea what a baby's immediate needs were, let alone an understanding of how these early years were like setting the stage for Carter's future.
And I think this is part of the reason why today's conversation is so important. And part of that is because children in these early years are less likely to be seen and supported if they are home with a caregiver that...
Right, like a potentially unsafe caregiver.
Yeah, exactly. And they're missing then out on all of the early learning opportunities.
They are. And listener, let's just pause and start with what I think is a fun fact. But did you know that by the age of 5, a child's brain is already about 90% developed?
Yeah. Obviously, I knew that because we've talked about it, but it really is incredible when you stop and think about that.
Yeah.
But what that means is that the experiences that children have in their first few years of life are literally shaping the architecture of their brains. And what we mean by architecture is it's not only just the structure, but it's the shape of the brain and the connections of the brain.
Exactly. And during these years, children are building the skills that they'll use for the rest of their lives, language skills, emotional regulation, social skills, problem solving, and even the ability to form healthy relationships.
Yeah. And, when we're saying learning here, we're not just talking about ABCs or 1, 2, 3s,
right?
Writing your name.
Although those are all great.
Yes,
right?
very important. Don't get us wrong, very important.
But you're right that learning at this age also looks like, a baby hearing someone talk to them. It's singing songs, reading books, stacking blocks. It's just little ones exploring the world and having responsive adults who, smile at them and comfort them and encourage them.
Right. It's learning that the world is safe, hopefully.
Yeah.
But it's, if that child cries, someone comes to attend. That is starting to help teach that child that they matter.
Yeah.
Right.
And those seemingly simple moments are actually powerful building blocks for future success in school and in life.
And we call it a serve and return, like in tennis, you've served it and you're asking for a response. And that's what babies, and as they're growing, kids need. But unfortunately, for many of the children that CASA serves, children with instability in their home and potentially living with unsafe caregivers, those early experiences in childhood can look very, very different.
They can. Last year, nearly half of the children referred to Henrico Casa were under the age of 5.
Right.
And so many of these children had experienced abuse, neglect, housing instability, parental substance use, domestic violence, or some also had significant mental health challenges within their homes. And so experiences like those or those circumstances can really disrupt how a young brain is growing and learning.
Right. And when children are in what we call survival mode, learning often takes a back seat. I always say stressed brains they can't learn.
Exactly, they can. And trauma changes how a child's brain responds to the world.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of focusing on, exploration and learning, these kids' brains become focused on just one thing, which is, am I safe?
Right. And, listener, we hope that this just makes sense here.
Mm-hmm.
If you're worried about where you'll sleep tonight or whether the adults around you are safe or okay, it's really hard to focus on things like learning colors or developing language skills that you're not even probably being prompted to learn in the first place either.
Yeah, and that's why early adversity can show up later as, developmental delay.
Right.
Or maybe difficulty regulating your emotion or challenges in school.
Exactly. And I think what we always like to remind our listeners is that while these can be negative outcomes, there's still hope, right?
Yeah.
And these outcomes are not always destiny.
Absolutely not. We've seen and experienced, but we also read, from research that children's brains are remarkably resilient.
Exactly. And I know that I've said this about 1 million times in my years at CASA. Kristen, you've said it about 1 million times in your time with CASA, but I think it's worth saying again is that the other thing that research really shows us is that one caring, consistent relationship can be the game changer for children.
Yeah.
Their care and attention and consistency that they'll receive from that one safe, consistent person can make all the difference to help children overcome adversity.
Yeah, and specific to this topic of early childhood learning, CASA advocates are so important because they're asking questions that go beyond immediate safety concerns.
Right.
Is this child receiving developmental screenings? Are they enrolled in preschool? Do they have opportunities to socialize and play? Does their caregiver have the support that they need?
Right. And that's at the core because parents and caregivers are or should be a child's first teacher.
Yeah.
And so sometimes our role at CASA is to determine if that is occurring and then help connect families to resources that can strengthen that relationship. And, for us, when we're looking at what might those resources be, that's parent coaching, early intervention services, quality childcare, or those developmental supports that they might need.
Yeah, connecting to resources is definitely important. And so is playing teacher yourself, right? Because again, early learning isn't academic knowledge. It's just skill building.
Yeah. And I think we could also say brain building.
Yeah. Early childhood learning is brain building for life, right?
We love it.
So listener, whether you're a CASA advocate, a grandparent, a teacher, a neighbor, a friend, whatever role you play in a child's life, you can support early learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And, engaging in early learning with children from that birth to 5 is honestly simple and accessible.
It is. And, in thinking of how can you implement this or what things can you do, my first suggestion would be to just talk to the children in your life, narrate your day, ask questions, sing songs. By verbalizing things, you're calling the child's attention to what's around them and making connections between what they see and what they hear.
And that's really actually easy to do. You're just sort of talking your day out loud.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Another thing that I would suggest is reading. It doesn't have to be fancy, and you don't have to try to get them reading.
Right.
But just a few minutes a day, or setting up a consistent schedule where every night before bedtime we read a book, it makes a difference. And, plug to our local libraries, right? Because take them to the library so they can pick out the books that they're interested in, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great suggestion. Another one that came to my mind was just to ramp up the play, right?
Yeah.
Because play is one of the primary ways children learn.
Right.
So play games, role play with their stuffed animals, create an obstacle course, You'll have a ton of fun, and the kids don't even know they're learning and building these neurological connections.
Super fun.
Are. Yeah.
Kids at heart, right? Very good. And then as we're talking here, one other thing that, I think we should just add or underscore is that if you're doing these exercises, though, you still have to be present, though,
right,
and responsive, not going through just the motions, right? So that's putting down the phone, getting on that child's level, let them know that you're hearing them or you're seeing them. Talk to them, listen to the responses, even if it's babbling, right? Just it's conversational, and what I call that serve and return to spur along that future language and relationship skills.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. This was actually something that Carter's CASA advocate had been addressing with his parents. They're so young, and they're still developing their ability to care for Carter and to give him the stability he needs. And so while Carter is living with a relative, he's having supervised visits with his parents. And Carter's advocate is facilitating these visits. And so she's monitoring and documenting how the parents interact with Carter for the court.
Exactly. And I love that CASA is helping to maintain Carter's relationship with his parents at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
Agree. And even more so, the advocate is able to support appropriate engagement. This advocate's helping guide the parents' expectations and planning and interactions with Carter. Basically, the advocate's helping them be the first teachers that Carter needs as he develops over the next 5 years.
And I mean, that's just so great for Carter, right? So when thinking back on our tips for sneaking early learning into our daily routines with children from birth to 5, I think one thing stands out to me, and that with all of our suggestions, and that's, what did we say, Kristen? We said talking, playing, reading, just conversing, being responsive. I mean, these things are all quite simple and ordinary.
Yeah, but they're extraordinary for brain development.
Love
right?
it. Yes. And at CASA, when we are explaining our mission, we often start off by saying that every child deserves a childhood. And, today, just talking through this, I'm definitely reminded that childhood should include these opportunities and opportunities to learn and explore, ask questions, and discover the world that is around them.
Yeah. And for children who have experienced abuse or neglect, early learning opportunities can easily be interrupted or non-existent. But with intervention, support, and caring adults who show up, we can help restore those opportunities.
Exactly. So listener, let's all remember that when we invest in a child's earliest years, we are absolutely investing in their future.
And really, we're investing in the future of our entire community, I'd argue. Yeah.
And the first 5 years matter, and they matter immensely. And that really is every conversation, every story that is read, every safe relationship is an investment in that child's future.
Absolutely. And so this week, listener, our call to action is for all of us to make a few investments, right? Narrate your day, read with a child, play, have a conversation.
And for the children in our lives who may have experienced adversity, just always remember that it's never too late to start learning or to try to get them back on track.
Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casa's new podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.